guys, and welcome to the Los Blancos podcast. Today we will be discussing Castilla talents as well as some fringe players' futures at Real Madrid. So, without further ado, join us after this short interval. Okay, for the first section of today's podcast, we are going to be discussing Castilla talents. Now, obviously, at the start of the season, we discussed, the main Castilla talents and whether they should stay at Real Madrid or, whether we should be loaned out or stay at Castilla. So, we've had a new crop of talent bedded in, players like Miguel and Antonio Blanco have obviously been called up to the first team. But now, Raul's had to integrate some new players, and I think, this has been a real test for Raul's credentials because they haven't enjoyed a good start to the campaign in the third division. They've found themselves mid-table, and I think, Raul has to try and fix that. They're slowly getting better now. Yesterday they won against Costa Bravo, which 1-0 win with one of the players, which we will be talking about later, scoring a goal. And I think some of these players are very, very talented. But one thing I've noticed about this certain crop of players is that we haven't found there are some outstanding players who could end up playing for Real Madrid, but the majority of them, they are quite you can see them becoming La Liga starters, maybe mid-table. And I think, that could prove valuable to Real Madrid, a good source of income if we continue getting these players through that, who aren't world beaters, but it could eventually cause us to sell them for a good profit. So what do you think on this current crop of talent from Castilla?
Yes, of course. In relation to the Castilla players, maybe there are like 3 players I can say who maybe can have a future at Real Madrid, and I'm not including Miguel and Antonio in this list, but maybe there are 3 others who I think can definitely, fight for a space in the first team. However, there may not be much that can actually break into Real Madrid because of the talent that we have, the signings that we might make. So yeah, a lot of them we might sell on for a bit of cash that can help us out in the future. So maybe, I don't know, maybe like Marvin might be sold actually, but that's just an example. But yeah, not many of them can actually make it at Real Madrid because let's not forget, Real Madrid are the biggest team in the world. They'll always be interested in signings. For example, even the Camavinga signing did affect the minutes for Antonio Blanco. So that's just an example. And Antonio Blanco is the captain of Castilla and one of the best young players at Real Madrid. And if a sign of Camavinga, a young player in Camavinga, can hinder his pathway to the first team, then any signing can actually affect these players and hinder their pathway. So that's what makes it a bit difficult for them to actually have a future in this team.
Yeah, okay, so without further ado, let's get right into these players. So, some of them we're going to be spending a little bit longer on, obviously the players that are probably better than the others, and some of them will just be quick skimming over them. Let's start with a player who's probably not going to play for Real Madrid in his career, but could end up becoming a decent player in La Liga. It's Juan Milatasa. Now, this season alone, he's got 2 goals in 8 appearances. Not exactly the best of numbers, and if he was to make a pathway into Real Madrid's first team, he would have had to try and step up and replace Hugo Duro's goal output from last season, which was truly fantastic from Hugo Duro. But Latasa's had a fairly good start to the season. So, what do you think on Juan Latasa?
Yeah, of course, he's a talented player. He knows how to find the back of the net. He's a nice little striker there. However, it will be difficult for him to actually, like you said, have opportunity in the first team. I actually do think that in the attack for Real Madrid, that will be the most difficult position in my opinion because of the talent pool at Real Madrid in terms of the attackers. And we all know that Real Madrid love to sign those nice, amazing Galactico players. So that's definitely going to affect any up-and-coming attackers, unless they can bring something different to the table, like a specific player I'm going to get to. But Latasa actually can finish When there's opportunities to score, he will find the back of the net. I saw a few of his goals in some of the Castilla matches. He can definitely finish. But however, in terms of his stats, there are 2 goals in 8 games. That's not really top of the notch stats. However, he is a decent player. But in terms of him making it to the first team, it might be a bit difficult for him, especially as he's a forward, and of course, there's so many attackers attacking forward in the options, in the center, I should say, for Real Madrid. So he's a nice little player, but I think that he needs to work on a lot of stuff in terms of getting himself integrated into the game itself. I've seen a few of Castilla matches, especially when he was there. I don't think he did as much as I would have liked, like for a striker, but he isn't a bad player.
Yeah, we'll move on to his partner in crime, Andre Johnson, who, for me, has a much brighter future at Real Madrid because the guy is obviously very talented. His father was a famous footballer as well. Isaac Johnson used to play for Chelsea and for Barcelona, so he was a pretty good footballer himself. Andre Johnson, he's you can see the potential with him. He obviously he didn't play last season a lot because he had a long term injury, but he's come back. 9 appearances, same output as Juan Latasa, 2 goals, but he's added an assist as well. He's 6'2", and most impressively, he's scoring for Iceland nationally, 4 caps and 2 goals. Those caps have come off the bench, and I think he could be useful as a substitute. His play style is very similar to Erling Haaland. He looks a bit like Erling Haaland as well. So, what do you think on Andre Johnson?
Yeah, of course, the good thing for him is that he's from Iceland, so of course it's going to make it easier for him to break into the first team, into the Icelandic international first team. That's an advantage that he has over the other Castilla players who are mostly from Spain and other tough countries. He's from Iceland, but he's a good player. He actually, like Latasa, he can definitely finish. And he actually, for his size, has a good bit of speed, actually, in terms of getting in behind. So that's a good thing. Definitely, he actually is. I actually did thought it was 6'3" from one of the pages that I normally check out players from. But 6'2" actually, his movement at 6'2" isn't bad at all. I must admit I haven't seen as much of him, that as you may have seen. However, but I've been impressed with some of the goals he scored. Like I said, like Latasa, he is a good finisher as well. For a striker, that's good.
Yeah, and he speaks fluent Spanish, which is important as well. But one thing also, he scored the goal yesterday against Costa Brava, and that was a good goal as well. I think a good finish, and I think ultimately he could have a future to play at Real Madrid. But I think if we sell the likes of Jovic and Mariano, which in terms of Mariano, which we'll speak on later, it looks unlikely. And in terms of Jovic, it looks increasingly likely that Jovic will leave. So he could prove to be a good backup for Benzema and potentially Haaland in the future. He looks like a good player. So I have high hopes for him, and I think he's one of the players that I've hopes to get into the Real Madrid first team. So let's move on to our next player, who is Joan Jardi, who was signed from Barca B in the last summer, and he's got one under-18 cap. He's a direct winger. He plays on the right wing. He's right-footed as well. So he's very, very talented, and I think he might not have a future at Real Madrid, but he is definitely a La Liga level in the future. So, what do you think on Jean Hardy?
Okay, compared to our other wingers, I haven't seen much of Jadi, and that's mostly because I've known the Castilla wingers, the other Castilla wingers who we get to later on for a much longer time period. However, when he did sign for Real Madrid, from Barcelona. Definitely, I was interested in the story and the player. So I did actually have a look at him. However, it's a bit difficult to judge a player's talent, from just watching videos, etc. However, he did seem like a nice, composed winger, and from what I've seen here. But how would you judge the player of his chances at Real Madrid and maybe his playing style?
As I said before, he is a direct winger. He likes to go on the outside with his right foot. He can cut in as well from the left. He plays on the left for Castilla quite a lot. So I think in that way he's a good little winger, a good little option to have. But I think his major strength is to go on the outside and try and hit one into the box, or try and hit one of the near post. So I think that's his strength. But he definitely has weaknesses. His left foot ain't that good. I don't think it is. He's at Barca when I watched him because I knew he was coming to Real Madrid. I saw that he hit a few left foot goals. We haven't seen that at Castilla, and he hasn't contributed yet at Castilla. Raul probably doesn't trust him enough yet. But he might have a future at Castilla, but I don't think he has a future at Real Madrid.
Okay, so in terms of, I'm just going to bring up another winger, so we can compare him to. If you can compare him to Marvin Park, is he better than Marvin Park in your opinion? Because I've seen a lot of Marvin Park, so maybe I can have a better idea of the player if you can compare him to Marvin Park.
With Marvin, it's a different playing style ultimately. Marvin is the ultimate winger. He's the out and out winger of the team, and I think ultimately with Marvin, it's tough because Marvin Park is more defensively reliable than Jean Jardy. You're going to get more work rate out of Marvin. We've seen him play at right back, filling at right back for us last season. I would say technically that Jean Jardy is definitely better, but if you were to, I think for Real Madrid, I think Jean Jardy would be better, but for maybe lower down in the league, I think Marvin Park would be more valuable because of his work rate.
I think actually something about Marvin Park is when he plays for Real Madrid, he seems like a bit like raw in my opinion, that he needs some stuff to work on, for example, in terms of his skill to get past players. However, he is a fast player and he definitely can make runs forward. So do you think that his best position can be as a wing back? Because when I see him play in a few of the games at fullback, it reminded me a bit of Hakimi in my opinion. I know that's a big of a step too far. However, he did seem really fast, and he did seem to time his runs properly. In one of the games where he played at fullback, and I'm not too sure exactly which game it was. However, he made that overlapping run, and similar to Hakimi, he had a chance to score and he jogged it wide on last season. However, I know that he missed the chance there, but everything leading up to the chance was good in terms of his movement. So maybe if he can play as maybe a wing back, do you think that it can actually help him in the future?
Since you've mentioned Marvin, we might as well move on to him. But with Marvin, I think it's one of those cases where it's an average winger, but a very good fullback. And I think we've seen the likes of Adama Traore. He would be an exceptional wing back in my opinion. But with Marvin, yes, I think it is better for him to be a right back because his defensive contribution up there is wasted. He doesn't press much, but his ability to win back the ball is very, very good. And I think at right back, I think he would be a lot more, his mistakes going forward and, in possession would be hidden quite a lot. And I think that's probably for the better of the team, really. So, I think that right back would be the better position for Marvin Park. Let's move on now to probably one of the best players in Castilla, Sergio Arribas. Now, with Arribas, he's obviously the star man, and I think if there is any chance of any of these players getting in, I would put my put everything on Sergio Arribas because he's clearly the most talented out of the lot, because he seems like the most natural player out of this team, and I think 3 goals, 2 assists prove that. So what do you think on Sergio Arribas?
Yeah, he's also good in set pieces as well, especially penalties and free kicks, and dead ball situations, indirect or direct options. But he's like a good technical player who can shift in field. In terms of playing for Real Madrid, I've seen a lot of the games where he played. Of course, he didn't have his best of times when he played in the first team. Didn't have a bad game, but he didn't like integrate himself into the match like he usually does at Castilla because of the talent pool when he normally plays it. With Madrid, he's mostly played like out wide. He actually played as a left wing back, I think, against Atalanta last year. In the Champions League, he came on as a substitute and featured as a left wing back. However, he is a bit versatile in terms of where he can play, but his best position, I can say, is when he comes in field on playing in the half spaces.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously much more talented down the middle, because he likes to be that star man, and I think he's got that trait to be the star man and to play as the star man, really. So I think, yeah, he's better down the middle than on the wing. He's a bit like Asensio in that way, and I think because of that, that's probably why he won't succeed at Real Madrid, because as we know, Real Madrid do not use number 10s, and that is his best role, to play as the main man. And I think, just like Asensio in that way, his talent will probably be wasted. So, yeah, what do you think? Would you, if you were Carlo Ancelotti, would you play him as the number 10, or would you continue to persist on the wings?
Okay, well, Carlo Ancelotti actually, in one of his recent conferences, he did say that the 4-3-3 will be the main formation. He did say that it's not a non-negotiable formation. However, he think it's the best position for this talent, for this core of talent. However, the issue is I honestly don't think that Carlo Ancelotti is going to change anything in terms of his formation for Arribas to come in. I think that maybe when Ancelotti does leave, I don't expect Ancelotti to stay maybe more than 2 seasons, in my opinion. I think there will be an opportunity for a change, and Perez will actually take up on it one day. I don't think Ancelotti will be the right man long term, but short term, yes. So because Ancelotti is there, it's difficult to see Arribas coming in and getting many minutes for example, in the Copa del Rey, I think we have so many options at the moment who's barely getting game time for us to try to bring in a Castilla player and let them get a lot of minutes. I think Arribas, what I would suggest to Madrid is, because I just think that he needs to be in a team where he can be the star man, in my opinion, similar to what Oscar Rodriguez did when he went to Leganes. I think if he can find a team in the league that can give him that opportunity, then I think we should take it. Or maybe in the Segunda B division, not Segunda B, in the Segunda division, where he can actually, it's a tougher league than the 2 divisions. So of course he's going to have more minutes in a better division and a better team. Suggesting that if we can afford him a team where he can be that star man and develop a bit more thing, then he can come back to Madrid and become a better player and maybe start in the future, especially when Ancelotti leaves and coach has more versatility to incorporate these players. I'm not saying Ancelotti isn't versatile, but I think he is a 4-3-3 guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay, so let's try and rattle off a few now, like quickly, let's move on. So Mario Gila, a good player, he's close to the first team, probably the closest out of the defenders. But yeah, I think he's a good player, he's an alright player. So what do you think of Mario Gila?
I mean, similar to Chus, in my opinion, I don't think there's much differences between them. He's a good player, but I think that he isn't like like a really outstanding defender, in my opinion. For him to actually get into the first team, similar to Pablo Ramon, and their chances to break into the first team. I think they should eventually be loaned out, in my opinion, so we can understand them more, similar to what Schuster's doing now.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to the next one. Alvaro Carrillo, and in my opinion, he's the defender with the most potential out of this lot. Definitely right now the worst of the current crop, but in my opinion, I could see a lot of ability within him. Whether we could get it out of him, that's a different question altogether. But he's played centre back and right back, and I think because of that, he could be a very, very useful player to us, and I think that sort of player is invaluable. So, what do you think on Alvaro Carrillo?
I must admit, compared to the other talented players that we have, I haven't seen much of this player. So I think your analysis would be much better off than mine at this time.
Okay, so he's obviously quicker than the rest of the players, and recovery wise, he's much better. But I think one thing that he's better at than all of the other centre backs that have come through the La Fabrica system is that he's got a lot more ball playing ability than the rest of them. He's got a lot more than Mario Gila and Victor Chust, Pablo Ramon. All of these players, he's got a lot more than them. That's what I think makes him. He's not an outstanding defender. I don't think in that way. I think recovery wise is his main defensive ability. In terms of actually standing tackles, sliding interceptions, he's not particularly brilliant. But I think having that ball playing, you can liken him to Piqué in that way. He's not exactly the most exceptional defender, but ball playing ability is very, very good. So yeah, I think he could be a useful player, and in my opinion, he could play for Real Madrid one day.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, let's move on to the next player. We'll do the most potential, most talking last. We'll move on to the next player, Sergio Santos. Already made one appearance for Real Madrid in La Liga this year. I can't remember which game it was exactly.
It was against Mallorca.
Yeah.
1-6-1.
Oh yes. Okay, so yeah, it obviously came on in a game where we had already won it pretty much. So yeah, obviously not much pressure on him to perform in that game. He did well for the little time he had. I do think he's not got too much of a future. I don't think he's particularly exceptional, but he could be a bit like Miguel Gutierrez. Miguel wasn't exactly exceptional for Castilla either. He just did well when the moment came to him. So if he does well, then that's good for him. But there's not much analysis to be made. He has had one assist this year in the Segunda B of Spain. So yeah, let's hope he can do well for us in the future.
Yeah, of course. I think he didn't do badly in the game against Mallorca. He's also a player I haven't seen much of. If it's one thing that I should say about after we wrap this up in terms of Real Madrid Castilla talents, I think in order to make it at Real Madrid, there needs to be like something different to the table that they need to bring. I don't think that if you're just a right back, let's just say a normal right back like Sergio Santos, he doesn't do anything exceptional. For example, at Marvin, why I say that he can be a good fullback is because of his abilities in attack and his overlapping hands, etc. So I just think in order to make it at Real Madrid, I think that it's difficult for the players, but I think they need to have unique qualities that can define them, like Arribas and Marvin. So hence, it's a bit difficult for most of these players we just mentioned, to make it into the first team and have a fit, yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's move on to the next player. Oscar Aranda. Now, 12 appearances, 4 goals. Not all for the Castilla, but some of them for either U19s in the youth league. So, he's obviously a very talented player. He's a left winger / striker. He's 5'11", he's 19. He looks really good for what we can see. He's more underrated in my opinion. I think he's been used as a bench option to come on, and I think in the future once Sergio Arribas gets called up or leaves, or when Andrigo Johnson or Juan Milatasa, he will be the next part of the next setup, and I think he will be a main player. So have you seen much of Oscar Aranda?
Yeah, I've actually seen a bit of him in the UEFA Youth League, and he does seem a bit confident in terms of when he dribbles with the balls from the left and comes inside. He does seem like a really talented player, in my opinion. I'm looking forward to seeing him maybe have a cameo in the first team. I'm not too sure when that could be possible, but to see how he can cope with the pressure at Madrid, or maybe the talent that he has alongside him. So I'm looking forward to see him get more minutes. But he definitely is a nice little player who can dribble. He can shoot. He scored a really good goal against Shakhtar under 19 in the youth league. I'm not too sure if you've seen it, but maybe the goalkeeper could have done better. But it was a good goal, a shot from outside the box. So he's a nice, confident player, and that's good for Real Madrid. But I'd like to see more of him in terms of his game time, etc.
Yep. Okay. So let's move on. Theo Zidane. I would say he's the most talented Zidane son to come out of the youth system. We haven't seen Elias Zidane yet, but we've already seen Enzo and Luca, and I think Theo's currently he seems like a Zidane son because his flair, and I think his ability to get past people. I think his output's not great. But 8 appearances, 0 goals, 0 assists. That needs to improve in order for him to make it. But he definitely has the ability to make it at Real Madrid. And I think he offers us something different. And I think, as you said before, if in order to make it at Real Madrid from the youth system, you need to offer something different. And I think that's what Theo offers. His ability to dribble from the midfield is something that we haven't had. As I said, from since Isco, previous podcasts. So, yeah, I think he's a good player. So, have you seen much of Theo Zidane?
Actually, I've seen a bit of him. Of course, he does have a bit of flair, like you said. I just think that he needs to, in my opinion, maybe improve a bit on some of his decision making in terms of the few games that I've seen him play. Of course, he's good on the ball. I think he can make good passes, etc. He's a good technical player. However, there's still a lot of qualities that he should improve on. Not in terms of his on the ball ability, or his play, etc., or his talent, but in terms of maybe, and that's going to come with experience. In terms of maybe his decision making, when to release a pass, etc. But he is a good player.
Yeah, let's move on to Marvel. Obviously, Spanish / Moroccan, born in Morocco actually, born in Casablanca. 4 appearances in the youth league, and he's been instrumental in that defense, in that youth league defense. He's been fantastic, and he's made 3 appearances in the 3rd division as well. So he's been instrumental in leading us to 2nd place in the youth league, and I think he's a very, very talented defender. We are bound to see more of him. Obviously, we probably haven't seen the best of his abilities just yet. I think he could get better. So we'll wait. We will wait. So yeah. So what do you think of Marvel, and have you seen a lot of him?
Okay, I actually haven't seen much of him actually, so it's going to be a bit difficult for me to make an analysis on him. An accurate analysis on him.
Okay, so I'll lead the analysis then. Marvel, he's a good centre back. He's a no nonsense centre back. As we said before, Alvaro Carrillo he's a more ball playing centre back. Marvel's he's probably the opposite. Ball playing ability is not that great, but his actual defensive ability. One thing I do want to highlight though is his ability in the air is so far ahead of most people his age, which is really, really good to see. I think if we need to close out a game, he could be very, very good at that. Just to head things away, and I think that could be very, very useful. So let's move on to the last player on my list. It's Peter Gonzalez. Now I think Peter Gonzalez has been exceptional this year. He's been very, very good. He's made 14 appearances and he's scored 4 goals. He's kept Marvin off the first of the Castilla first team. So, what do you think on Peter Gonzalez? And did you see his goal against Villarreal?
I haven't seen it. I'm definitely going to check it out. But in terms of his playing style, I've definitely seen a lot of analysis on him in terms of what he does with the ball, how good his movement is, how he can shift into space and collect the ball and drive at players. I think I've actually seen more of his on the ball ability and his movement more than the goals he's scored, which is good because when a player is good enough for to be analyzed on his movement at such a young age and how talented he is in terms of driving with the ball, then that's good. There have been reports coming out recently that states that he can actually have a chance on the wing, because of no one actually nailed down a position at Madrid. I'm sure many people would have seen it at that time. But he does seem like a really talented player. Like we said, to play at Madrid, you need to be unique and have unique qualities, which he does. Especially on the wing, on the right hand side, to be specific. And that's good. I think he can definitely maybe a backup to the backups at Madrid for this season and next season, in my opinion. But I would love to see him have an opportunity, have a cameo, because he does seem confident. And maybe if he has a cameo at Madrid with better service and better players, of course, he can definitely have a chance of making a good impact on the game. But I think he's a player I'm excited for. I definitely would love to see much about him, but he is a good player. He's really fast as well. I've seen some reports compare him to Sane, but because he does seem comfortable on the right wing, and that's important. Many players play on the right wing, but however, they are more traditional wingers, because most right-footed wingers these days will play on the left and drift inside. But he's so comfortable. What is he, a right footer or left foot?
He's a left footer. He's a left footer. That's why the goal against Villarreal, he cuts in off the right and puts it into the top corner.
Okay. Well, he does seem really comfortable on the right hand side, which is good for Real Madrid. So I think he should have a few opportunities in the first team. One more question about him: how old is he?
He's I haven't got that down here. It's I think he's 19. But I will have to check that out before the next.
Okay. Well, he does seem like a really talented player. So do you think that he should, maybe have a chance in the first team, especially how, like many of the reports said, that not a single player was able to nail down a position on the wing at Madrid so far this season. So do you think that he should have a chance, like a little cameo, so that the fans can actually start to understand him more?
If it ain't gonna, I'm gonna say this before I do anything. If it isn't gonna happen this year, it's never gonna happen for Peter, because next season it's looking very, very likely that we'll sign Kylian Mbappe. Almost guaranteed that we'll sign Kylian Mbappe, and he's not making it past Kylian Mbappe no matter what. So I think ultimately it has to happen for him this season, where there's a bit turmoil on the right wing. Bale's constantly getting injuries. Rodrigo's picking up little knocks here and there. Hazard's not being favoured by Ancelotti. One thing has to be said though, Asensio put in a very good performance yesterday against Rayo Vallecano. So maybe Asensio could try and nail down that spot, but it's been a season of turmoil on that right wing, and I think if Peter can nail down that spot, he could be the main backup to Kylian Mbappe when he comes to Real Madrid. So I would like to see him. This is why I do like the League Cup system in England, where if we do have a League Cup, it'll provide early chances to youngsters instead of waiting for the Copa del Rey into January. So I think if we had a League Cup in Spain, I think it would have been perfect for Peter Gonzalez to grow against some okay opposition. So I think I do think he should be given some chances, but when that chance should be given, I'm not sure. So let's hope he can be given some chances against maybe a Copa del Rey team, or just maybe in La Liga or some substitute cameos.
Yeah, definitely, because it would be a bit difficult when all the signings are made, etc. You're trying to shoehorn them into the team. it's going to be difficult for him to get his opportunity. So yeah, I think you're on point there. He needs to have that opportunity this season.
Yeah, okay, so that's the end of the first part of the podcast. Next part, we will be discussing fringe players and their futures at Real Madrid. Join us after this short interval. Okay, so the last part of today's podcast, we will be discussing fringe players and their futures at Real Madrid. Now, we're going to start with Marco Asensio. Now, he's obviously had a bumpy time in the last 2 years following the ACL injury. This season, he's been up and down. Obviously, that the top was the performance against Mallorca where he scored the hat trick. And the bottom has been, he's hit quite a few lows where he's been missing basically in matches against Villarreal and Espanyol. So I think ultimately there has to be something done with Asensio because, he can't keep having these inconsistent performances. Yesterday he put in another great performance against Rayo Vallecano, but we don't know when his next good performance is going to come. Whether it's going to come after after the international break against maybe Inter, after maybe against Sheriff, we don't know. That's the problem with Asensio, is that he's so inconsistent. So I would like to know, what would you do with Asensio? Would you try to make him a success at Real Madrid, bearing in mind he's still only 25, and, try and hit the heights of his potential that, he showed in 2018, 2017, So would you try to get those, trying to hit those heights, or would you end up selling him to maybe a Borussia Dortmund or a Liverpool who seem to be always linked with him?
Okay, well, firstly, in terms of selling Asensio, I don't think it makes sense to sell Asensio, especially if you're not going to get much money for him, because Real Madrid will want like maybe 50 million if you're being realistic. I think that's fair enough, but I don't think that we should sell Asensio because I don't think there's any other player like him in the first team in my opinion. Even if we sign Mbappe, Haaland, he's quite different to the others, so he will be able to get game time and coexist with maybe Mbappe and Haaland, etc. But there isn't any other player like him in the squad in my opinion. So I'm not going to sell. It doesn't make sense to sell a talented player when he's doing well, when he has shown that he can be capable of scoring goals and making assists. It doesn't make sense because many coaches seem to like him. Whoever the coach is at Madrid, they always find a way to incorporate Asensio. I think definitely he can have a future at Madrid. Definitely that if he can show a bit more consistency, like you said, last year's youth, and then he will definitely have more minutes. I think that in terms of Asensio's qualities, because he's starting to show a bit more promise, maybe down the middle, that he's going to get more opportunities in the future from coaches, because they've seen Ancelotti try that formation with Asensio in the middle. I think maybe when Ancelotti does leave and Mbappe signs, etc., the wings definitely will be too crowded for him. So he will have to adapt to playing in the middle, and that's something I'm excited about because you're not going to sell a player if you don't have a similar one to replace him. It doesn't make sense in my opinion. I don't think the money would be worth it in this instance, because I think he can definitely even be a good backup option in my opinion, even if he's not starting. So I won't sell Asensio unless it's like a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, I don't know with Asensio because he can put in the performance like he did yesterday and it gets your hopes up, but a lot of the time it's false hope because he puts in a 1 in 4 performance. It goes from very, very good to okay to missing, very, very good, okay, missing. That's Asensio. That's the Asensio flowchart. I mean, it's really, really difficult to see Dortmund or Liverpool offer big money for him because the form that Asensio's displayed it's just not been good. It has it over the last 2 years, ever since the ACL injury. I mean, with his form, I mean, you could see him succeeding at Liverpool because of the way that Klopp sets up his midfield. You could see him succeed at Dortmund because of the way they develop their players. Could you see him succeeding at Real Madrid? I'm not sure at this point anymore, because we've seen the performance at right wing, you've seen the performance at centre midfielder. With Asensio, is a very, very systematic player. You saw against Barcelona. The last goal for Lucas Vazquez. He drove up the ball up the pitch when it was Barcelona trying to snatch a late goal. We saw him. When he was 1-on-1 with the defenders. He just eased past them, and he took the shot. It wasn't great, but Lucas Vazquez latched onto the deflection, and I think with that, I think Asensio shows he can be valuable in those situations. But how many times is that situation going to crop up for Real Madrid? It's probably not a lot. And I think in that way, you can't really think. You also saw the performance against Liverpool last year. He was fantastic alongside Vinny. Bouncing off of Benzema, they just run past the Liverpool defence. Who were all over the place, and I think that shows Asensio could be valuable, but in the it's tough, isn't it? I mean, if he was to play the midfield, which was talked about earlier this season, but it's been packed out. It's been truly packed out by Cruz, Camavinga, Modric, Casemiro, Blanco, all of this lot, Valverde, and he hasn't had the opportunity to get into the midfield, so I'm unable to see him getting into the midfield, and I think ultimately, if he doesn't change things this season, this will be his last season for Real Madrid, because I just can't see Florentino retaining a player who's not performing, especially when 30 million could be enough to just seal Haaland. So I don't know about his future at Real Madrid. I would definitely keep him because he can put in the good performance. But is that performance worth keeping? That's the main question for him. And, he's got one season left to impress. I don't think he can be sold in January. I don't think he should be sold in January. One season is all he's got at Real Madrid, unless he puts it the performances.
Yeah, I think in terms of Asensio, it's difficult to see him as an out-and-out starter. But maybe if everyone starts accepting that he's going to be a backup option, to feed you off the bench, feed you into cameos, and because he does seem a bit more willing, he is offering more than Eden Hazard at this time. So I think that's what's actually keeping him getting minutes. Because, for example, if Hazard actually started the season on form, then it would have been difficult for him to get minutes. But I think with Asensio, I just think it's time that we start accepting that he's going to be a squad option at this time. Because he definitely is still useful. He definitely puts in a good performance. Maybe if everyone starts accepting that he's maybe a rotation option, it's going to be a lot easier for him. Because we still see how good he was in the 17-18 season and a bit in the 16-17. So, but however, he's still doing well. Like you said, I'm not going to sell him in January. Maybe we should give him until the end of the season to, see if he stays or leaves. But as of now, I'm not going to sell him in January, especially as Vinny and Rodrigo are the only productive winners at this time.
Yeah, let's move on to his main competitor right now for that right wing position, Eden Hazard. And I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, Ancelotti out for constant whenever there's a starting 11 announcement, and Hazard's not in it, from the Hazard fans. And I just don't know with Hazard. I mean, I don't understand what Hazard has done to deserve a place on the bench. I think he should have been given minutes recently. Maybe in the Shakhtar game, I think he could have impacted the game against Rayo. It proved to be the right decision to start Asensio, but maybe Hazard would have done equally as good, maybe even better. With Hazard, he's not the lightning quick, agile winger he once was. Slaloming all around that defence. he's become a number 10, ultimately creating chances rather than, being the main guy in a team to dribble around. And I think he's adopted the role of just, drifting into the middle and just laying off passes rather than becoming the main guy to create things out of his own magic. So I think Ancelotti right now isn't justified. I don't think there is a reason to justify Hazard not starting. However, he's been constantly proved right. Lucas Vazquez's performance against Shakhtar was pretty good. Asensio's performance against Rayo was pretty good. So, what do you think on Hazard, and do you think he should be starting more?
Firstly, there's a lot of times where Real Madrid seem to lack something in going forward after Vinicius and Benzema in terms of connecting the midfield to attack a bit. Sometimes, especially against Shakhtar Donetsk, I think Eden Hazard can be very beneficial in terms of that and helping out the team. However, he isn't in the best of form, and personally, Carlo Ancelotti went with Lucas. Of course, I couldn't complain about that decision because it did work out at the end. He went with Asensio, and yesterday it worked out. When Eden Hazard plays, he doesn't offer much at this time. Like you said, he's lost a bit of his speed and his drive at players. It's difficult to get that back once you lost it, similar to Alexis Sanchez, like I've said previously. So, personally for me, it's a bit difficult, to try to get Hazard back at his best. I just think that, we just have to accept his performances this season, just accept that he's a squad player, try to let him get as much minutes as possible when he can, when we can afford it, so he can make an impact on the team. But it's clear that Ancelotti, like he says, he prefers other players at this time, and that's because Hazard hasn't been doing much. And that's my opinion. He hasn't been doing much when he plays. Of course, he does nice dribbles. He comes into the midfield and makes nice passes. However, he doesn't do much other than that, in my opinion. So I'm not going to blame Ancelotti for his choices. Even Zidane left Hazard on the bench at the end of his tenure, and I think that's a sign, in my opinion, because Zidane would have started Hazard every opportunity he got. And coming down after that Chelsea game, he just started Vinicius in the last 3 games of the season, and that was a clear sign for me. And I knew that something wasn't right with Hazard when Zidane made that choices, because Zidane is one of Hazard's biggest supporters. So now that Ancelotti is doing it as well, I'm not shocked. So I just think we'd have to last this out this season. Sadly for me, I think Eden Hazard might leave at the end of the season. I'm not too sure which club he's going to go to, but I think he might leave. I think time is actually running out for him. The difference with him and Asensio is Hazard is 5 years older. Hazard costs 150 million. 100 million, I do apologize.
Yeah, with Asensio, you can see him still succeeding. He's 25. He's still got the pace. He's still got the physically still up to standard. Hazard's just not it anymore. And I think unless something drastic happens, we're not talking about Asensio, where if Asensio scores maybe 10 goals, maybe gets 5 assists. We're talking a proper big season from Hazard, 15 goals, 15 assists. I don't think he will be retained come the end of the season, because his wages, we're talking some of the biggest in the squad, that probably prevents us signing many players. And I think at this point it's damage limitation with Hazard's value, because right now it's probably the lowest it's ever been. Who's going to sign him? That's another question. There is no suitors out there apart from maybe a Qatari club or a Chinese club probably not Chinese, or a Turkish club, Fenerbahce, I believe it was, that constantly speaks about Hazard. Hazard and Özil linking up in Istanbul. Maybe that could be a nice end to his career, but he's just not got it at Real Madrid anymore. I just don't see it working out. You know, we had a lot of hope coming into the season, you know, a few good performances, but it's just not, it's not going to happen anymore, is it? I've lost complete faith in Hazard at this point. You know, it's beyond the point where we're able to salvage it. You know, his performances. You know, we can take the chance creation and go for it. You know, we can get that out of different players. We can get that out of Rodrigo. You know, just ask him to put a few crosses in for Benzema, and there you go. Hazard's output match right there. You know, we could ask Asensio to dribble up from deep. Hazard's output match there. You know, all these players, they can easily just match Hazard's output. It's not worth it for Hazard. And I think at this point, cut your losses. You know, you're never gonna make that profit. That was always in mind. You're never gonna make a profit on Hazard when you bought him. You know, and I think it was just, we should have seen it back then that it wasn't a good idea. 1 year left on the contract, and we still paid, what is it, 120 million for him. That was just such a stupid decision. You know, we could have waited 1 year and it would have gone for free. That was what we were doing there. I don't understand. And I think at this point it's done for him at Real Madrid.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think so as well. I just think he's a kind of player. In terms of what happened to Hazard, it's definitely made me a bit more skeptical in terms of Real Madrid signing older players, older transfers. You know, I know that, for example, if we are linked to Salah and Son, they are more hard-working and different, you know, but I just think it's the signing that did scare me a bit in terms of whenever Real Madrid is interested in a player, you know, so, yeah, like you said, you know, there are players who will contribute more, like Asensio. If you're looking for someone to dribble from deep, you have Isco, you know, what Hazard does, you know, at this time. I don't think he does enough, so it's a bit sad, but I think it's time to part ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's move on to Isco. Now, I've made my opinions clear on Isco, and I think it's been unfair. His treatment's been unfair this season, because when he played at the start of the season, he did pretty well, and I think, you know, at the end of the season he's going to leave. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, we might as well try to play him and retain a bit of that value, so we could try and sell him off to Milan in January. But Carlo just simply has other ideas, and I think it's about unfair because, you know, you could see the amount of work he was putting in at the start of the season. You know, trying getting himself fit to play week in, week out. It's in my opinion, it's been a bit unfair on Isco. You know, you obviously can see that Camavinga and Valverde are both better players than Isco, but I think Isco still can do a job ultimately, and he proved that at the start of the season. You know, he scored a goal against Mallorca, you know, bearing in mind that a few players did that. So, to be honest, I think that Isco should have been given more minutes by now. I think he shouldn't be like behind, you know, Casemiro, Modric, Cruz, Valverde, Camavinga, Ceballos, Asensio. He shouldn't be behind them in terms of the pecking order. So yeah, what do you think on Isco?
Isco is definitely a talented player. I think he definitely can offer something different, you know, to what Camavinga and Fede Valverde contribute to the team. I think in relation to Isco, of course, his contract will expire at the end of the season. In terms of signing a new contract, I think if Isco does well and coming out to this final half of the season, well, not the final half, but maybe it's going to take him a while to actually get opportunities. So that's why I said final half. So coming out to the final half of the season, I think if Isco does well and shows that he can contribute, I think we should give him maybe 1 more year, you know, because we don't have a player like him in the squad. But all signs point to the end for Isco because the coach is using him. Yes, he's injured at the moment. He just came back, I think, but the coach isn't using him as much as he should at this time. So it doesn't make sense keeping a player if he's not being utilized. But I'm not going to say unfair. I just think that, you know, there are so many other options at this time. He isn't old because Luka Modric is 36 and he's still playing consistently. I just think with Isco, I think maybe it's time that we part ways for the benefits of the player, in my opinion, because if he isn't playing, then he isn't going to show how good of a player he is. And maybe I think Real Madrid is starting to focus on other players at the time. So I like his score. I really do like his score, especially for what he's done. But maybe I just think it's time that we part ways with him for the benefit of everyone, including the player. I think it's different to Eden Hazard. Isco has been a successful player at Real Madrid. Um, every fan would say that. I don't think there's a single Real Madrid fan who will not appreciate and be happy with what Isco has done, for this team.
Yeah, okay, so let's move on to... we'll do the two strikers at once, Jovic and Mariano, which I mentioned earlier in the podcast. Yeah, I mean, their future's probably done. Jovic probably quicker, because you can see every time Mariano goes on the field, he gives 110%, because, he broke his nose the other day when he played against Elche, and it was just... He broke his nose. Whenever he plays, he puts in too much effort, because every single time you can see it's not sustainable, and I think every single time he gets on that pitch for Real Madrid, I think this guy would be so good for a mid-table club, like so good, and I think that's been like forgotten about. I think if he did play for someone like Rayo Vallecano, which was obviously expected at the start of the window, he would be so good for Rayo, alongside Radamel Falcao. So I think he wouldn't have had to move. He would have got a wage rise. It would have been perfect for him. And I think he just, it's a disappointment that a player of his talents is wasting himself. With Jovic, I think he's just not contributing anything to Real Madrid. Maradona at this point, I think, is a better option than Jovic. I saw it against Elche. Mariano did really well, I think, in my opinion. He did better than Jovic when he made his cameo against Shakhtar. He did all right, must be said. But I think Mariano is probably more reliable than Jovic. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. You know what? It's sad, but I think, agree with you on that, because I think you know that I'm a big fan of Luka Jovic, because his finishing was so deadly for Frankfurt. For Frankfurt, I should say. I do apologize. He is such a good striker when he was at Frankfurt. I'm going to add in that when he was at Frankfurt, because he hasn't shown much at Madrid. It's not one season; it's been 2 seasons. I think the biggest issue for Luka Jovic, of course, is the injuries. I just think if he wasn't injured, he would have had more game time, because there was a lot of times when Benzema was injured, and Luka Jovic maybe was injured also, or maybe had COVID, which is unfortunate. I just think that I just think, similar to Hazard, I just think it's time that we sell Luka Jovic. In my opinion, I definitely was a big fan of his signing. Definitely would have loved that he would have gotten a bigger chance, a better opportunity, but I don't think that's possible at this time. Real Madrid won't play with 2 strikers. Luka Jovic hasn't done enough to convince a coach that Real Madrid should play with 2 strikers. So definitely, like you said, Mariano is ahead of him at this time. The issue with Mariano is that he's injured a lot as well. I do like Mariano as a player, but the issue with him is that I think that he can be so good for another team. That's my biggest issue with him, because he is such a talented player. I wouldn't say such a talented player, because there are many strikers who would be better for Real Madrid. But I just think that he has qualities, that he can have a very successful career, in my opinion. The longer he waits to get a move, I think there would be less interested parties. So that's the only thing about Mariano, in my opinion. There are too many strikers that I think Real Madrid can sign that can be better than both of them. So in terms of talent, I think they both have unique qualities. In terms of succeeding at Madrid, I think it's time that that we part ways, with Jovic first, because I think we can still get a bit of cash for him. So it's a bit sad and anticlimactic, but I think that at the end of the season, both may leave, especially because Real Madrid will want to sign Erling Haaland. So definitely, I would jump on that train in my opinion. Haaland and Benzema as our strikers, and with definitely Castilla players coming through. Um, what's the Icelandic guy? How do you pronounce his name?
Anthony Johnson.
Yeah, definitely he can play for Castilla and falling into the like a two striker position, and of course Rodrigo can play as a nine as well. So if you have Haaland and Benzema, there's no need for a two-choice striker, in my opinion. So it's a bit sad, but I think that's it for these players. Even if we don't sign Haaland, I still think it's time to move on. We've been trying to incorporate them or make them be useful as much as possible for too long, in my opinion. Well, for Jovic, because Mariano has always been a backup, but it's a bit sad, but I just think it's where we part ways with Jovic, in my opinion.
Yeah, just before we move on to the next player, I think these two signings should prove to Real Madrid why you shouldn't buy a player based off of one season. And I think this should prevent us from making one season wonder signings. It's sad to see, but Jovic, he only had one good season at Eintracht Frankfurt. The signs were there that he might not make it at Real Madrid because he only had one season of brilliance. The other seasons at Benfica and Frankfurt, they were both pretty bad, to be honest. Not Frankfurt, but Benfica. And Mariano only had one season at Lyon before he ultimately came to Real Madrid. So I think someone like Vlahovic, he should prove why we shouldn't sign someone like that based off of one season. Let's move on to the last player, Gareth Bale. Now, there's been news that Real Madrid are looking to sack him off on loan in January, which I just don't understand, because at the start of the season he was putting up good output, and I think ultimately he can be missing in games, but unlike Asensio, where he's missing in games, he can actually contribute, and I think at right wing, which is our problem position, he can solve that. Despite his injuries, I think let him just finish his career at Real Madrid instead of trying to loan him out and make his final year anticlimactic. So, what do you think on Gareth Bale?
Yeah, of course, he should have the opportunity to finish it, in my opinion. He still has qualities that can be beneficial with a shot from distance, coming in on the right-hand side and having a shot. He actually had a good season last year for Spurs, a decent season with good output. So he can definitely contribute and be beneficial to Madrid. I think he should have the opportunity to have his final year at Madrid. If it's his last year in football, then I think he should have his opportunity, that's because he can still contribute, in my opinion. That's why I think he should have the opportunity, because he's been doing well when he played. However, we all accept that it will be his last year, and that's because his wages are too high and he's injured a lot. So you can't just commit to him for another year, even if he's doing well, because the focus should definitely turn to Haaland and Mbappe next year in terms of his wages. That's why I think all these players are going to leave. It's going to be easier for Real Madrid to sell them off, or Ancelotti to understand why Perez wants to sell them, because he knows the bigger picture is Mbappe and Haaland. And that's why Isco, Jovic, Bale, Hazard, even though that maybe every Madrid fan will say, maybe there may be something down there. They may still be able to pull out the performance, but at Madrid, that's not good enough. At Madrid, you can't get paid so much money to contribute so little, especially if you're injured a lot. So all of these players which we mentioned today, I think maybe not Jovic. If he has an opportunity to leave, he might leave. But they will have an opportunity to end the season, and that's because Madrid are unlikely to make signings in January. They'll have the opportunity, but I think come next year, the bigger picture will be Mbappe and signing Haaland. So I just think that we all know that this is the end of the line for Bale and the other players which we mentioned.
Yeah, it's sad to see, but it's necessary. Many teams have to do this every single time, because you're gonna have to ultimately turn over a squad, and this is we're witnessing the end of the proper the three-peat, lineup. We're witnessing the end of, the players, Bale, Isco, now we're all going to leave, within the next few years. We're going to see Cruz, Modric, Benzema leave. And I think, it's sad, but it's necessary. And I think, every team in the world has to do this, otherwise you're going to have to fail. And I think failing's not an option for Real Madrid. So, yeah, have you got anything else to say on these players before we end the podcast?
No, I think we all know what's going to happen at the end of the season with these players. I think with Sergio Ramos leaving, especially, I think it's going to make it so much easier for the fans to accept like these players leaving, because if they can, see the captain for 16 years leave Real Madrid, I think seeing a player like Isco or Bale leave, it's going to be a lot easier for the club to do, for the fans to accept. I think when Sergio Ramos left, I think that was the end of an era in terms of the tribute. Staying on, of course, there's still some left over, but I think that most of these players are eventually going to fade away and be sold, handed 1-year contracts like Modric, like Toni Kroos might get if he wants to continue. So I think, like you said, we have to incorporate new players into the team. Otherwise, it's going to result in failure. I think we're doing it well at the moment with Vinicius, etc., because they are the future. Vinicius, Rodrigo, Brahim will come back. I've seen reports that he will come back when his loan expires. So Real Madrid are doing it the right way. It's sad to see all those players leave, but it has to be done. It's football. It happens. Every team, no matter the year, all the good players, they're all going to retire one day and drop off in quality.
Yeah, and let's hope that this new crop of players can define a new era as well. So, yeah, that's the end of today's podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.